I'm going to try to do several things today. Among them is not walk in front of the projector during the talk. The other is to try to be engaging, and the last is try to remember to repeat your questions if you have them. What I'm here to talk about today is HTML5 apps, and specifically a little bit about the Enyo JavaScript framework, in which I work on. So let's dive right in. And one thing I'd like to say is I'd like to kind of keep this more conversational, so if you have questions, please feel free to ask. If I don't catch your eye, just wave or dance, something. Who am I? My name is Roy Sutton. I'm a developer, and there we go. I'm a developer relations engineer with HP. HP is funding the Enyo JavaScript framework, which is an open source project, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. But I've been a developer for a very long time and been doing mobile work for probably almost 20 years. So I know a little bit about mobile, but you didn't come here to learn about me. So the question is that people have asked a lot lately is native development a better choice for developing mobile applications than JavaScript and HTML5? And this is something that HP tackled a long time ago when, actually back when it was Palm. Palm decided to make the touchpad and the pre-phones, and we decided that mobile was going to be the future, and we wanted to develop a platform around HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Sadly, that platform is no longer available, but I think that the truth about HTML5 and JavaScript and CSS is that it is going to be a compelling platform for mobile development and desktop development as well. There are a number of benefits to this approach, and those include that there are a lot of people out there who have skills with HTML5 and CSS and JavaScript, and this expertise has been used in enterprise and other areas where people have been developing, say, intranets and other types of places where information is available. And now the challenge is to get that information out to users who've brought in their own device. And that's a place where apps come into play. Another benefit is for cross-platform development, you don't have to train a group to understand Objective-C and one to understand Java, and then perhaps another one to learn C#. You can use the same code base and reuse it. Certainly, there are challenges, though. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect for everything. There are use cases where it may be better to develop a mobile app than it is to use an HTML5 and JavaScript solution. Particularly, it can be very difficult, particularly if you have users who are using very old Android devices, for example, that are not as powerful as today's smartphones. Or you have a lot of users on IE8. It can be very painful. At least IE6 is mostly dead now, but it can be difficult to do it right, and that's why we put forth the Enyo JavaScript framework, because there were a lot of ideas about developing applications for mobile that don't work very well in practice, and so Enyo was developed to solve those problems. So what is Enyo? Enyo is, as I said, a JavaScript app development framework. It is not jQuery. It's not something for developing web pages. It's for developing apps. These are interactive applications that are either embedded into a web page or run on a device, run on a desktop. Enyo was designed to be cross-platform. That means it works both for mobile and desktop, Android, iOS, BlackBerry, a number of different platforms. It is a free and open source project based on the Apache 2.0 license, and we encourage people to take it and do whatever they want with it. Why should you care? I talked a little bit about mobile app development, and why Enyo is a solution for that, and I'll get into that a little more, but it was designed from the ground up for creating apps. It wasn't something that has been modified over time to take it from a framework for developing web pages and make that into something that could be used for making apps. It builds up on JavaScript. Somebody came by the booth earlier today, the table where I was, and they said, I saw your workshop yesterday, and it really seems like Enyo gives you a better way to make JavaScript applications. And I said, yeah, that's a pretty fair way to do it. There's a very small core, it's about 25K gzipped, which forms the core of Enyo, and then there are modular components on top, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Other reasons why you might want to use it is it has a professionally designed widget set, so you can have a consistent look and feel for your app across the platforms. You don't have an app on Android that looks like it's an iOS app, or vice versa. Nothing will turn off your users more than giving them an app that looks like it was designed for another platform. Another thing that we have is strong community support. Because we do all of our development out in the open on GitHub, we have a lot of developers involved who are not on the core team but are contributing either through our community gallery where reusable components are available, or they're contributing documentation or patches. So it's a very interactive community. And the last feature is that as a developer myself, because it's cross-platform, I can run my app, which I'm developing for iOS, on my desktop browser, and I can then take advantage of the debugging tools and the DOM inspector and all of those things that are available on the desktop browser for debugging my app and making sure that it's working properly. Enyo is, as I said, a modular framework, and the 4 pieces that make it up: the core, a layout library which assists in performing advanced layouts, responsive design for mobile devices and desktop, and the Onyx UI toolkit. The 4th piece is something called Aries, which is a what you see, what you get, a development tool for creating applications. Drag and drop widgets onto a screen, double click, add some code. So it's an IDE for developing JavaScript applications. It is a work in progress right now. It has not been released, and but it is available on GitHub, and you can take a look at it now. What I'm going to do, though, I'm going to talk a little bit about the core because that's getting a little bit into the programming side. So I'll just touch on the features, but I'll spend more time talking about layout and Onyx because I think those are 2 compelling areas for app developers. So Enyo does try to provide a framework, for creating JavaScript applications. What we try and do in Enyo is encourage people to break their problems down into smaller pieces, which we call kinds. And the reason we do this is for the aforementioned reuse. What we try to encourage is encapsulation by providing a framework for properties, published properties, and events on objects, so that you can take an object and it has a clearly defined API for using it, and you're not mucking around with the internals of that object. You're only speaking to it by setting properties and receiving events from it. So it makes it very easy to build up an application by taking components and composing them together to make more complex components. And then you can take those components and build them together until you've got a whole app built up from this. And I'll show a little bit more about that later. As I mentioned, the Onyx library provides a professional widget set, and what I'd like to do now is just show you rather than tell you about it, because I think it's really one of the strong suits of Enyo. So here's the Onyx toolset. It provides a number of common widgets that you would need for creating a modern application: headers, buttons, grouped buttons, icons, checkboxes. And each of these are styled in a style which is distinctive, but not not reminiscent of any particular platform. It would look at home on practically any platform, I think, even on the desktop. Sliders, drawers, menus for selecting items, pickers, date and time pickers, spinners, tooltips, pop-ups. Basically a whole toolkit for developing an application. So by letting you focus on putting your application logic together, you can get up to speed much more quickly with Onyx. Certainly you can develop each one of these things with HTML yourself, but we've provided these base classes, and then you can derive from them and create your own. Give them different look, feel, theme them for your app, add additional functionality. Now, my next slide was about advanced layout. Layout is a particular problem on mobile. You have an application, if we're going to say this is going to be cross-platform, you've got different form factors. You've got a phone, very limited real estate. You've got a desktop application where somebody may have a very huge screen. If you presented a very tiny screen on somebody's desktop, it's not a very usable application. So Enyo provides a number of tools for creating responsive designs, and that is through the layout library. And I'll talk a little bit about that now by just showing it. So the first piece is a fittable layout component, which mimics the Flexbox model if you've ever used that inside of Chrome or WebKit browsers. Basically, with fittable layouts, you can create one component within a set that can expand either vertically or horizontally while the others stay at a fixed size. I can show that off very quickly. So the box here is expanding and contracting. The next piece is a list component. Lists are something that is very hard to do on mobile. They work great on desktop. You can stick 10,000 items into a DOM on a desktop browser, or at least modern ones, and scroll through them, and there's no real performance penalty. But when you put that on, say, an older Android device, that's going to slow down tremendously. So lists are something that we've spent a lot of time working with, and we have a list component which is optimized to perform best on each different platform. So you don't have to go out and study, what are all the bugs with Android version 4.0 with scrolling via CSS transforms. We've done that hard work. So here's a list, thousands of items. I encourage you to, if you'd like, go load this up on your phone. Go to enyojs.com/sampler and take a look at this scrolling list on your device. This one is, as we can see, this has got a thumb wheel because we're on a desktop, but if you were on a mobile device, it would use touch scrolling. Here's another example of thousands of items, or hundreds of items in this case, but that are interactive, and we can do operations on them. Next is the one that I think is one of the most compelling components within the layout library, and that is the one that allows us to do a lot of responsive design by giving us a way to present information to the user that can adjust to the size of their display. As you can see right now, I've got two different panels. I've got a left panel here where I've got a list of choices the user can make, and when they click on one, the information comes up on the right-hand side. However, the user can expand this panel so that it takes up the whole screen, and you might have noticed when I shrunk this down, the panel automatically collapsed down so that it's in a single view. This might be something you could see on a phone. So when you tap on that, the image view opens up within the single pane here. And we can open up another pane with the source code. So a wonderful thing about this samplers is that the source code is all available here, showing you how the application was put together. And you can view the CSS that was used. And We can even jump to JS Fiddle. I don't know how many of you are familiar with JS Fiddle, but it's a fantastic tool for debugging and testing JavaScript. Enyo is one of the frameworks that they feature on JS Fiddle, and you can easily load up a working example from the samplers, play with it, change things around, see how you might make it different. So there you go. So I've made a change, tested it out. That looks pretty interesting. Oops. Let's close that. So that's the panel component, and there are a number of different features available with the panel component. That's one sample there, but there are a number of arrangers for creating things like carousels, sliding in and out different pages within the panel. So there's a lot of there are a lot of features that are available for working with different types of content within panels. So very powerful. Briefly, there are tree views and image views and an image carousel, which is useful for presenting information. Some of the things that we've just come out with are a globalization library for easily translating applications to different languages, working within different locales, such as date pickers, which are locale aware, time pickers. And in beta right now is a sort of an MVC library for working with Enyo, which ties into Backbone for doing pulling data from various data sources and working with that within Enyo. Something that enterprise applications often have need of. So you've created an application within Enyo. What do you do with it? As I said, we're cross-platform. How do you get it to these different platforms? For web, you can easily host a Enyo application into a web page, put it within a special div or a certain div within a web page, or serve it as the whole document. You can deploy it to tablets and phones using PhoneGap. There was a great discussion yesterday in the workshops about using PhoneGap for deploying applications cross-platform. One of the great things about working with PhoneGap is you can use PhoneGap Build online, and you can create an iOS application on a PC, push it up to PhoneGap Build, and it sends back a packaged application which you could upload to the App Store. Very handy. People have told me that you can package these things up as a Google Chrome app. I've seen that, actually. Somebody says it works fine on the Wii even. They ran it on the Wii U, and it works well there. For desktop packaging, there's the Intel App Up Encapsulator, another web-based packaging tool where you can upload a zipped copy of your application and it'll spit back an executable that can be installed on Windows. And let's see here. Theoretically, with the Tide SDK, you could also create a packaged application for Mac, Linux, and Windows. I haven't done that myself. Here are some of the supported application or the supported platforms that we run on. Windows 8 support just came out in the 2.1.1 release, which was the day before yesterday. Kindle Fire HD support was also added then, and all the modern desktop browsers, i.e. back to version 8. So we can support most of the enterprise needs for people who still haven't upgraded to a more modern browser. And one of the great things about this project is there's a lot of information online about it. The documentation is very good. There's the sampler that I showed you. There are also API reference, tutorials. There's a GitHub-based wiki with a lot of information on using all the different pieces. And I'm happy to say that there is a book coming out on Enyo published by O'Reilly, which will be out in February. And I wrote that, and I'm very proud of it. So hopefully you'll check that out and buy lots of copies. All of the source code is on GitHub at github.com/EnyoJS, and I encourage you to take a look at that. There's a lot of good information in there. The source code is very readable, and you can learn a lot just by looking through the core of Enyo. There's also IRC channel, and our Twitter handle is EnyoJS. And that does it. That was pretty fast. Questions?
Sure. So if I'm a jQuery mobile developer, right, and that's been my background, why would I want to switch to Enyo, or should I switch to Enyo?
Okay, the question was, if you're a jQuery mobile user now, should you switch to Enyo? And absolutely, you should switch. Why should you switch? There are a couple of reasons. I think that it's worthwhile to consider Enyo. jQuery mobile and Enyo are a little bit different. jQuery mobile certainly gets closer to what you need for creating applications and provides you the UI pieces. But Enyo, I think, provides a more comprehensive approach to making mobile applications. jQuery mobile still seems more like it was designed for taking web pages and making them useful on mobile. Whereas I think Enyo is more similar to Sencha Touch, but with a little bit easier to use and with a much more permissive license than Sencha Touch has. So I think that's part of it. A lot of the performance tuning that we've done for Enyo, so that you don't fall into habits that produce apps that run slowly. I think that's another reason. I encourage you to check it out, because there are, I didn't really get to talk about how apps are made with Enyo and what they look like, but Enyo, you don't have to code a lot of esoteric HTML and put things in there and then call back later to change them. Enyo generates the DOM for you. You build up your application by saying what pieces are going to be where, and then Enyo renders those for you into the HTML. So it takes care of a lot of the issues that you might have with layout and organizing your code effectively.
When is the drag and drop editor coming?
The drag and drop editor? That's a good question, and I'm not sure when it's due for release. It'll be released when it's ready. As I understand it right now, it's fairly functional, and I haven't run it myself in months, so I don't know. Yes?
I have two questions. First of all, quick one. What's Enyo's business model? And then the second one is, it seems from what I've looked both on the website and from descriptions, is you're in the JavaScript to GUI camp rather than describing the GUI in terms of an HTML or XML structure. Is there a way of doing that? And if not, how do you see designers working in HTML?
Okay, I'll try and remember your second question while I answer your first question.
Okay.
The first question was, okay, I already forgot the first question.
The second one's more important, so just answer that one.
Oh, okay. The second question was about the separation between design and app development, and I'm paraphrasing here, obviously.
Kind of JavaScript driven, and how do you?
Yes, so we're very JavaScript driven. Where do designers come in? Where do they fit into the whole package? We've tried to take that into account. Still styling is done with CSS. Layout is done within JavaScript, but of course you can place things around with CSS. So what we look at in this case is the designer designs the look and feel of the application, the developer implements it, and then the theming and whatnot can take place through CSS, so that the designers still have a role in developing the application. One of the things I love about it is I'm not a designer, but I can still produce applications that look good, and then I can then turn that over to somebody and say, oh, can you give me some CSS for this? Can you style this, these buttons and these things so that it looks better? And they can do that. But if I don't do that, I still produce an app that doesn't look like it was a web page that was put on a mobile device, which I think is one of the real strengths. Oh, the first question you had was about the business model.
Yeah.
How do we make money selling Enyo when we don't sell it? We don't. We don't have to make money selling Enyo, because it is an open source project. It's funded by HP, so we get to work on this. We get paid to work on an open source project. HP does take Enyo and use it internally. So there are, there are reasons that HP is funding this. We're hoping to create a whole app ecosystem of JavaScript apps which work across platforms, because this just gives, I think it gives more leverage to developers for what they can do with their designs once they've created them.
Yes. One thing I noticed while browsing around the examples on the Enyo site is that certainly the ones on there all store their application state internally. There's no immediately apparent support for pushing application state to an anchor fragment or something like that, like Twitter does, or as far as I can tell, storing it locally in local storage. So what this means is that if I refresh my browser, I'm actually losing my application state. Is that just because they're example apps, or does anyone find a way of doing this easily or without a lot of effort on my part as a developer?
That's a good question. The question was that the sample apps on the website don't store any application state. So when you refresh the page, you've lost where you were. There are a number of different solutions available for app developers on Enyo, and of course, some of the same ones that are available for any HTML5 JavaScript approach. Local storage can be used fairly easily. We have some people who are working with, oh gosh, now I'm not going to remember the name, but you can store state information into the URL with the hash. Working with Backbone, you can store state back to a server. There's no limitation on where you can put application state, and certainly any type of application that's going to be served from a web page, you never know when the user's going to go back, forwards, accidentally reload the page. On a mobile device, it's not quite as important, although it's still very important that you store the state, and there's nothing that prevents you from doing that with.
But it's the developer's responsibility. Right?
It's somewhat the developer's responsibility. There are some kinds in there for working with local storage and cookies and things like that, so that you can store information. Certainly, I think that's something that could be more robust.
Can you make AJAX calls?
Can you please repeat that?
Can you make AJAX calls from?
Oh, AJAX calls, yes. The question was, can you make AJAX calls? Yes, there is I didn't show it, but there in the sampler are a couple samples of doing AJAX requests. They're in the Enyo core, AJAX here. We do have a wrapper around AJAX and JSONP for doing remote calls and fetching data. It wouldn't be much of a web app if it didn't have some kind of way to communicate with a server to fetch data. So yes.
You mentioned that you use this backbone, right? Can it work with something else like Knockout?
I've never used Knockout myself, so I don't know, but it should be possible to do that. Enyo works very well with other frameworks. It doesn't pollute the namespace and do a lot of bad things in the background. It does want to control the DOM, so it doesn't work very well with ones that do. But having said that, I have taken jQuery components and wrapped them so that they're Enyo components, so I can drop that component directly into an Enyo application without having to worry with all the jQuery initialization and whatnot. Just it works, and those two work together very well. As far as Knockout, I don't know. I don't know that it wouldn't work. Yes.
How do you handle the layouts for device families?
How do you handle the layouts?
Like, because we have seen in the last example, like iOS on Android, right? How do you handle that?
So the question is, how do you handle the layout on different devices? Well, a lot of the layout that we've done here is done with responsive design, where you use media queries in CSS to use different CSS based upon the device capabilities or the device density or whatever sort of measure you want to use for detecting that. So it's partly up to the app developer to choose how to respond to different app platforms. We don't have, say, an iOS look and an Android look. We encourage developers to create their, create a look for their application. Any other questions? Well, great. Thank you. I appreciate you all coming to the talk.